Hello, friends. Welcome to Literary Concepts. Today's topic is the postmodern period. So, the postmodern period started during 1960s onwards. So, now let us try to learn more about the postmodern period. The postmodern period in English literature started during 1960s and it is continued up to the contemporary period. So to this contemporary era, it continued. So this period marks a radical shift. So it is a we find a drastic major changes in literary uh, in literature, so particularly in literary aesthetics, ideology, and purpose. So it was emerged as a response to both modernist ideals and the socio-political upheavals of the mid 20th century. So it was a response to modernist ideals, modernist principles, and the socio-political disturbances which was happened during mid 20th century. So postmodern literature rejects the certainty, the definiteness, certainty, the conformity, order, and the coherence, the unity which was followed by the previous writers, that is, predecessors. Predecessors means the previous writers. So instead of following certainty, order, and unity, coherence, so here we find that the postmodern writers they embrace, they were attracted towards fragmentation, ambiguity, playfulness, and skepticism. So they accepted, they supported that fragmentation, that disintegration, ambiguity, so it is completely uncertainty and playfulness. We find that light-hearted contents and full of funny contents and skepticism. So which is completely mistrust and doubtful uh, events. Okay, doubtful themes. So these aspects we find in postmodern literature. The trauma of the World War II, the distress, okay, and the hurting scenario of the World War II, the Vietnam War, which was happened in Vietnam from 1955 to 1977. So, and the rise of media culture, consumer capitalism, and the questioning of authority and truth during the Cold War era. So, the Cold War was a hostility between Soviet countries and the Western powers, so which was occurred during 1945 to 1990s. So, it was a hostile situation between Soviet countries and Western powers. So all these things, so all these aspects, all these events, so significantly influenced the postmodern literary consciousness. So the postmodern literature so had a strong influence on postmodern writers. So the postmodern literature challenges the idea of a single and unified truth. We don't find one particular idea or a unification of truth or unified one single meaning in the postmodern literature. So it always questions that the grand narratives, understand? So the narrations of history, the narrations of the history, progress, and identity. So instead that it advocated the postmodern literature advocated advocates a pluralism, okay, supports a pluralism, relativism, and subjectivity. Pluralism means having different opinions, and beliefs. Relativism means it is a theory that the truth is not always the same but varies according to circumstances. Relativism in relativism theory, we find that the truth is not always the same. So it depends, it varies, okay, on the circumstances and the subjectivity. So we find that the influence of the personal feelings and opinions in postmodern literature. Now, let us try to understand the characteristics of postmodern literature. The fragmentation is a first characteristic, so that is disintegration. So, the brokenness, okay, disintegration, we find postmodern works often have fragmented structures, disintegrated structures, non-linear narratives. So we don't find one particular sequence of narration and disjointed timelines, so unconnected. There is okay, disjointed unconnected timelines, so reflecting that chaotic nature of modern life, the disturbed nature of modern life reflected in the postmodern works. The next characteristic is metafiction and self reflexivity. So the metafiction is beyond the fiction, fictional writing. Understand? So, writing about imaginary characters and events, self reflexivity, so that we find that referring to oneself, self references. So, postmodern works or text frequently comment on their own narrative processes. So, we find that self narrative processes and exposing the mechanics of, so the technicalities, the rules and technicalities of storytelling, and questioning the authority of the author. So here in the postmodern text we find the authority of the author is questioned. The next characteristic is intertextuality. So, intertextuality means the relationship between the different texts. Okay, the relationship between the texts or different texts. So, postmodern literature frequently references. So, it references reimagines other literary works. Okay, we find the references of other literary works. So intertextuality, so where that creating layers of meaning, different layers of meaning, we find, and emphasizing that interconnectedness of text, the linking, the link between the different text from one text to another text. That is what is called the interconnectedness of texts we find in the postmodern literature. The next characteristic is pastiche. So, pastiche means imitation. So, pastiche means imitation. So, following some style, following one particular style, imitating one style. So, the blending of different genres. So here in the passage we find blending combination of different genres, different styles, and cultural references is a hallmark of. So it is a quality symbol of postmodernism. So in postmodern works we find the combination of different genres, the combination of different styles, and the combination of different cultural references is a symbol of postmodernism, so often used to celebrate. So it is used to celebrate, at the same time it criticizes the cultural diversity. So we also find that celebration of cultural diversity, as well the criticism of cultural diversity in postmodern works. The next characteristic is irony and playfulness. So, irony, that is bitterness, sarcasm, and playfulness, so that is full of fun and funny. Both are combined together in postmodern works. So, the postmodern works they used irony, humor, absurdity. So these aspects they employed, they used for undermining serious and traditional themes. So, for what is that means making less importance, understand the traditional, okay, the traditional themes with a sense of playful irreverence, okay, disrespect, fun, with the fun, lot of fun. So we find that irreverence, understand disrespectfulness in the works of postmodern literature. The next characteristic is questioning of truth and subjectivity. So we find that there is a question on truth and subjectivity. So postmodernism rejects the idea of universal truths. So postmodernism, they rejected, they refused that idea of universal truths, and they focused more on, emphasized more on multiple perspectives, multiple understandings. Okay, so multiple views and outlooks, and the subjectivity of reality. So these aspects we find in the postmodern literature. The another characteristic is hyper reality. So hyper reality is an artificially created copy. It is a copy artificially created, so that is perceived, that is accepted as somehow more real than the real thing. So it looks like more real, okay, beyond the real than the originality itself, okay, than the reality itself. So this concept was influenced by the thinkers like Jean Baudrillard, okay, Jean Baudrillard. So it was influenced by the thinker like Jean Baudrillard. Now, postmodern works explore that blurring of reality, that unclear, okay, the blur means unclear, which is not having that clarity, the blurring of reality and simulation, that is imitation, following okay, something, imitating something, where representing, where representations can become more real than reality itself. So where we find that the representations, whatever that events or actions happened, so look like more real than the reality itself, whatever the originality is there. So beyond that, it is more original, it looks more original and more real. So that is what is called hyper reality. The next characteristic is cultural and historical relativism. So, cultural and historical relativism. So, postmodern literature often critiques the grand narratives of history. So, postmodern writers, they criticized the grand narratives of history, offering alternative perspectives, different outlooks, and questioning dominant ideologies. We find so questioning of dominant ideologies which were followed in the previous periods, so followed by the previous writers. The next characteristic is multiplicity of voices. We find that multiplicity of voices, different voices, the diverse and marginalized voices are prominent in postmodern literature. We find that marginalized, the downtrodden people, the weaker people, okay, and the diversified people's voices are very prominent in postmodern literature. So, where that we find that reflecting of plurality of human experiences, the plurality. So, more multiplicity of human experiences we find in postmodern literature. The next characteristic is technoculture and media influence. So, the impact of mass media, technology, and digital culture is a recurring theme in postmodern literature. So, we find that the influence of mass media, technology, and digital culture and reflecting that postmodern conditions of living. So reflect that. So the conditions of living in media saturated world, media completely filled with media. So in such a world, so we also find that living conditions, we okay, the living conditions of postmodern, okay, sorry, the living conditions of the people in this postmodern era. So these are the important characteristics of postmodern literature, postmodern period. Now, let us try to understand major writers and their works. The first writer is Thomas Pynchon. Okay, Thomas Pynchon, who was born in 1937. His important works are The Gravity's Rainbow, which was published in 1973, The Crying of Lot 49, which was published in 1969. These are the notable works of Thomas Pynchon. In his works, we find the themes like complex structure, paranoia, intertextuality. So these themes uh, we find in the Thomas Pynchon works. The next writer is Salman Rushdie, who was born in 1947. His important works are Midnight's Children, which was published in 1981, The Satanic Verses, which was published in 1988, Magical Realism, History, Post Colonial Identity. These themes we find in the works of Salman Rushdie. The next writer is Angela Carter, okay, who was born in 1940 and died in 1992. So Angela Carter's works, the first one is The Bloody Chamber, which was published in 1979. The next work is Nights at the Circus, which was published in 1984. Feminism, myth, gothic, and revisionist storytelling so are the themes of Angela Carter's works. The next writer is John Fowles, so whose time period started in 1926 and ended in 2005. So John Fowles' important works are, okay, the first one is The French Lieutenant's Woman, which was published in 1969. The next one is The Magus, which was published in 1969 itself. So metafiction, narrative play, post-Victorian critic. So these aspects we find in John Fowles' works. The next writer is Julian Barnes. Julian Burns, so who was born in 1946. His important works: Flaubert's Parrot, which was published in 1984; The Sense of an Ending, which was published in 2011. So irony, historical revision, unreliable narration. These are the important themes which we find in Julian Burns' writings. The next writer is Janet Winterson, who was born in 1959. His important works are Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, which was published in 1985. The next one, Written on the Body, which was published in 1992. Gender fluidity, post structuralist themes, identity politics. These are the important concepts which we find in Janet Winterson's writings. The next writer is Don DeLillo. Don DeLillo, so born in 1936. His important works are White Noise, which was published in 1985, Libra, which was published in 1988. So, media saturation, American identity, conspiracy, these are the important themes which we find in Don DeLillo works. Then the next writer is J.D. Smith. J.D. Smith, who was born in 1975. His important works are White Teeth, which was published in 2000, On Beauty, which was published in 2005. Multiculturalism, diaspora, family history. These are the key concepts of Jody Smith works. The next writer is Anthony Rich. Anthony Rich, who was born in 1929 and died in 2012. So, Andrew, Anthony Rich, important work is Diving into the Wreck, which was published in 1973. Identity, power, social justice are the themes of Andrew, Anthony Rich works. The next writer is John Asbury, who was born in 1927 and died in 2017. His important work is Self Portrait in a Canvas Mirror, which was published in 1975. The themes like complexity, ambiguity, resistance to traditional interpretation we find in the works of John Asbury. The next writer is Tom Stoppard, who was born in 1937. So his important work is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. So it was staged, first it was staged in 1966 but published in 1967. So the themes like humor, philosophy, meta theatricality, okay, one can find in the work of Tom Stoppard. Then the last writer is Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut, who was born in 1922 and died in 2007. His important works are Slaughterhouse 5, which was published in 1969. The next work is Cat's Cradle, which was published in 1963. War, trauma, critique of science, religion, and human folly. These are the themes of Kurt Vonnegut works. So I hope that you understand uh, period, the postmodern period. Thank you very much. If you please like this video, please okay like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much.